New York at night felt like a restless beast, half asleep, yet half awake. The rain tapped against the streets, neon lights reflected on the wet asphalt, and distant car horns echoed through the dark. Inside Bus Q52, silence reigned. The vehicle was old, its seats worn, its air heavy with the scent of dust and fatigue. The driver, a man in his 50s, kept his eyes locked forward, gripping the wheel as though afraid to let go. The passengers were a mixture of strangers, a weary woman clutching a heavy shopping bag, an immigrant holding a folder of precious documents, a tattooed veteran lost in his thoughts, and a boy no older than 12 hugging his backpack as if it were armor. At the next stop, a teenager climbed aboard. 15, maybe, though his hollow eyes made him seem older. He carried an old bag pressed tightly to his chest. Sitting in silence, he radiated unease. The rain grew heavier. The child in the back turned to look at him and froze. There was something in that stare, something broken and dangerous. The bus rolled on, but the night had shifted. None of them knew yet. This ride would not end as it began. 10 minutes passed in heavy silence. Rain hammered the windows, drowning out even the sound of the engine. The passengers sat frozen, each locked in private thoughts, yet all aware of a tension spreading like smoke. The teenager shifted at last. Slowly, almost ritualistically, he unzipped his bag. His hands trembled, not with fear, but anticipation. Metal flashed. A long machete slid free, its blade catching the dim light above. For a moment, no one moved. The woman gasped, clutching her bag to her chest. Papers fell from the immigrant's hands and scattered across the aisle. The veteran's jaw tightened, instincts waking from long sleep. But the boy in the back, the youngest, felt the full weight of those eyes on him. The teenager raised the blade, his lips curling into the faintest smile. The bus was no longer transport. It was a cage, sealed by rain and fear. Every breath became louder, sharper. And then, with a single step forward, the nightmare truly began. The teenager moved down the aisle, each step echoing against the metal floor. The passengers shrank back, pressing into their seats, eyes wide with disbelief. The boy in the back tried to make himself invisible, clutching his backpack tight, but the machete's gleam seemed aimed only at him. The driver shouted, "Hey, sit down," but his voice cracked with fear. In response, the teen lifted a small canister and sprayed. A burning mist filled the air, pepper spray. The driver coughed violently, clutching his face, the bus swerving before jerking back into control. Screams erupted. The woman cried out, shielding her head. The immigrant scrambled for his papers, hands shaking. The veteran rose halfway from his seat, torn between fear and instinct. But the teen's focus never wavered. His blade pointed toward the boy, his eyes blazing with something darker than rage, something primal, unstoppable. The bus, trapped in rain and night, had become a theater of terror. Panic swallowed the bus. The woman screamed for help, her voice drowned by the roar of the storm outside. The immigrant crawled on the floor, reaching for his scattered papers as if they could anchor him to safety. The veteran finally stood, towering over the seats, muscles tense, his gaze fixed on the machete. The teenager slashed the air, the blade whistling inches from a man's face. Sparks of terror lit every corner. The child scrambled between seats, heart pounding so loud it filled his ears. Passengers pushed against each other, desperate to flee, but the locked doors and pounding rain turned the bus into a prison. The driver, blinded and coughing, fumbled for the emergency radio, his hands slick with sweat. The teen's laughter, soft, broken, chilling, echoed in the narrow space. Fear thickened the air, suffocating, inescapable. The cage was closing tighter. And yet, in that chaos, the veteran clenched his fists. The decision had been made. The veteran stepped into the aisle, his shadow cutting through the chaos. His voice was steady, low, forged in years of battle. Enough. The machete-wielding teen froze, then tilted his head with a twisted grin. The two locked eyes, soldier against child, discipline against madness. Passengers held their breath. The woman clutched her bag like a shield, the immigrant huddled low, the boy crouched between seats, praying silently. The storm outside raged harder, wind rattling the bus as though the city itself was watching. The teenager lunged first, swinging the blade in a wild arc. The veteran dodged, years of reflex guiding him, and grabbed the attacker's arm. Metal screeched as the machete scraped against a seat. For a moment, they were locked in a deadly struggle, youth's fury against a man's strength. Gasps filled the bus. This was no longer just survival. It was a war within walls of steel. The struggle shook the bus. Metal groaned as the veteran slammed the teen against a seat, trying to wrench the machete free. The boy snarled like an animal, strength fueled by rage. Passengers screamed, pressed against windows, helpless spectators to a battle they could not escape. The child in the back watched, trembling, torn between terror and instinct. His breath came in shallow bursts, but something inside him shifted. Crawling low, he spotted the canister of pepper spray rolling across the floor. His small hand darted out, grabbing it before fear could stop him. The veteran's grip faltered, sweat slick, his age catching up. The machete inched closer to his chest. At that instant, the boy sprang forward, spraying the teen's face with burning mist. The attacker howled, thrashing blindly, blade clattering against the floor. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Then the bus erupted. Hope, fear, and chaos colliding in one violent breath. The teenager stumbled, clutching his burning eyes, the machete clanging to the floor. The bus seemed to breathe again, as if every passenger realized at once they were not helpless. The veteran kicked the weapon away, his chest heaving with effort. The woman, still trembling, shouted, "Now! Help him!" Her voice cracked, but carried a spark of courage. The immigrant crawled forward, gripping the teen's leg to drag him down. Others, fueled by desperation, joined in, hands pulling, fists striking, voices rising above the storm outside. The boy crouched close to the veteran, eyes wide, watching the scene transform. Fear had united them, strangers bound by survival. The teen thrashed wildly, screaming, his voice raw and guttural, but the weight of many overpowered the frenzy of one. At last, with a heavy thud, the veteran pinned him against the floor. The machete was gone. The storm still raged, but inside the bus, the tide had turned. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint at first, then growing louder, slicing through the pounding rain. Blue and red lights flickered against the wet glass, painting the bus in flashes of color. The passengers, still trembling, clung to one another in silence, their breath heavy and uneven. The veteran held the teenager pinned to the floor, his arms shaking from exhaustion but refusing to let go. The boy who had grabbed the pepper spray sat close, his small chest heaving, eyes locked on the figure of the attacker like he couldn't believe it was over. The doors hissed open. Armed officers stormed inside, weapons raised, shouts filling the cramped space. "Step back. Hands where we can see them." The veteran slowly lifted his hands, his body collapsing against a seat as he released the teen. Police swarmed, forcing the boy onto his stomach, cuffing his wrists behind his back. The machete, now lying under a seat, was kicked aside and bagged as evidence. For the first time, the teenager spoke. His voice was hoarse, trembling, yet oddly calm. He deserved it. They all do. His words cut through the silence like a knife sharper than the blade itself. The passengers exchanged looks, confusion, fear, disbelief. The child's lips quivered, and the woman instinctively pulled him into her arms, shielding him from the sound. One officer crouched, shining a flashlight into the teen's swollen eyes. "Why the boy?" he demanded. The teenager gave a cracked smile, whispering something only the closest could hear. "Because he reminded me of me." The words sent a chill through the bus. This wasn't random. It was personal. A cycle of pain repeating itself, born from shadows no one had seen until it was too late. The storm outside began to fade, but inside, the darkness felt heavier than ever. By dawn, the bus stood abandoned on the edge of Queens, its windows streaked with dried rain and the faint stains of chaos. Police tape fluttered in the morning wind, reporters gathering like vultures on the sidewalk. Cameras clicked, voices clashed, every headline hungry for blood. Teen with machete terrorizes passengers. Hero veteran saves bus from massacre. Violence in New York streets, again. The passengers were herded into a nearby precinct, each giving their statements under buzzing fluorescent lights. The woman's voice trembled as she recounted the first flash of the blade. The immigrant's hands shook, papers still damp, as he told officers how close the machete had come. The boy remained silent, sitting on a chair far too big for him, eyes fixed on the floor, as if replaying every moment in a loop he couldn't escape. The veteran leaned against the wall, exhausted. Reporters called him a hero, but his eyes said otherwise. He knew the look in the teenager's gaze, the kind that isn't born in one night, but carved over years of neglect, anger, and pain. He had seen it before, on battlefields where young men carried weapons with the same fire. Outside, the media turned the event into spectacle. Neighbors debated if the boy was a monster or a victim of a broken system. The city moved on quickly, as it always did, folding the horror into a headline, then into silence. But for the passengers, the scars lingered. The woman flinched every time she boarded a bus. The immigrant woke from nightmares, clutching his papers. The veteran stared at his reflection at night, wondering if violence ever truly ends. And the child, he carried the deepest scar of all. Not just the memory of the machete, but the echo of the teenager's final words. He reminded me of me. The thought festered, planting itself deep, whispering questions he wasn't ready to face. Weeks passed, but the night on Bus Q52 never truly ended. The city forgot, as it always does. New crimes replaced old ones. New headlines buried yesterday's horror. But for those who had lived it, the memory stayed alive, like a wound that refused to close. The woman returned to her routine, groceries in hand, but every creak of the bus door made her heart race. The immigrant finally secured his documents, yet he woke each night drenched in sweat, hearing phantom footsteps in the dark. The veteran walked the streets like a ghost, hailed as a savior by strangers, but inside, he carried a heavier truth. He hadn't saved anyone, not really. Violence, he knew, was a beast that never dies. It only changes faces. And the child, he sat at his desk in school, eyes blank, words of teachers washing over him like meaningless noise. At night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing the boy's whisper echo endlessly. Because he reminded me of me. He didn't understand why those words cut so deep, but they did. A seed had been planted, a shadow clinging to him, shaping how he saw himself. Some said the teenager was just another criminal. Others said he was a victim of a world that forgot him. But for the child, the line between monster and victim blurred until it was impossible to tell them apart. He began to wonder, not out of fear, but out of a dark curiosity, if someday he might carry the same look in his eyes. The storm had passed. The bus was gone. Yet the story was not over. Horror, after all, does not end with the blade. It lingers in silence, in memory, in the fragile minds of those left behind. And in the quietest hours of the night, when the city sleeps, the child still hears the scrape of steel against the floor and knows the nightmare is only waiting.